Welcome. You're in the right place if you're looking for a conversation about cybersecurity. And hopefully, I don't need to tell you, and I'll probably tell you multiple times that I am not a cybersecurity expert. I have some great tips today that were sourced from cybersecurity experts. So you will get real, hopefully actionable and valuable information. But I am not a programmer. I'm not a tech support person. I may have a certain level of sophistication, but I'm going to give you the best, what I think are practical tools that all of us can put into practice in one way or another. And yes, we're going to talk about passwords. And yes, we're going to talk about, what to do potentially if you do experience a breach, which most of us either have, or certainly if you haven't already, you've been very lucky and probably will, unfortunately, at some point in the future. But we're going to talk about that and some things we can do to mitigate the risks that we all face in this modern age. So to start off with here, and again, some people will be logging on as I go here, but I want to make sure we're getting done in a timely manner here. To start with, 2 seconds. That is every 2 seconds in America, someone's information is stolen in a breach. Again, I think most of us, certainly I have been a part of multiple breaches at this point. Here are a couple that have been in the news, but we all remember the credit score breach or the credit company breach. There was a Social Security breach at some point, and so they said it's possible that everyone alive's Social Security number was included in that somehow. Some of these I've been affected by. I think the Yahoo one I was. I think the Facebook one I maybe wasn't. So again, you get these emails, right, in your letters in your mailbox that say, hey, you may have been affected. Log on to this to find out if you are. Here's some free credit monitoring to kind of smooth it all over with you. And I guess we just go on living, right? And that's kind of the answer. We're going to go through how to prevent that as much as possible. But this is also just a fact of life, unfortunately, that these breaches happen. And despite our best efforts, they can continue to happen. And what do we do as individuals? Yes, to prevent them as much as possible. But, if you have a Facebook account, you're relying on Facebook. If you have a Yahoo email account, you're relying on Yahoo. And as we've seen, there have been vulnerabilities there. So what do we end up doing with ourselves going forward as well is a huge piece of the puzzle here. So this says 1 hour to savvy cybersecurity. That's just the name of the presentation. I can't guarantee that you're going to be, fully protected at any point. By the way, pretty much nobody can guarantee that. We've seen the federal government be affected by this, the biggest tech companies in the world be affected by this, with every incentive to prevent this, and it still happens. But again, this is about how can we protect ourselves as best as possible, and how do we then react if a breach does happen? And again, most of you probably have experience with this on some level, because I certainly do. So, and by the way, I'm Anthony Gerbi. I'm a financial advisor here at Stein Financial Group. I think most people on this call will know me, but there may be some new faces, and that's great. We'll have our contact info at the end of this, but there are plenty of ways to get in touch with us if you would ever like to, talk about this topic, cybersecurity, or any other topic. You can go right to our website and even just book a time with me on my calendar. So if there's anything in the financial world that you would just like to talk to somebody, talk to a pro about, that's what I'm here for. And please don't hesitate to do that. Even Aaron, if you want to put our bookings link in the chat, that would be great. And then it'll just be a link that everybody can click. So that's a little bit about me. We've got some disclosures here. I will make myself a little bit smaller if you care to read. If you're watching a replay of this, you can certainly just pause and read. It's just some definitions and things that are important to know. And one disclosure, again, that I will add, I said it right at the beginning, but it's worth saying again, I am not a IT professional, meaning I am not somebody who does programming or is, let's say, a cybersecurity expert myself, but being in the industry that I'm in, the financial industry, is very cautious about these sorts of things. And the information that we're going to go through here has been sourced from cybersecurity experts. So I'm just kind of your tour guide today, if you like. So one of the things that I want us to go through, and this is a resource, Aaron, if you would put this in the chat for people to download potentially, we'll also include this in the follow-up to this event. And really, you can do this without having the actual card, the scorecard in front of you. But this is basically what I wanted here was how well is any one person doing at cybersecurity? How do you know, how do you tell? How do you know how well you're doing? And one of the ways is you can take this quiz. Now, I'll walk through it with you. Now, there's a scorecard that goes along with this that we have access to. We'll send it along with the follow-up where, you can find out if you're pretty good or you're mediocre or, ooh, you're kind of in trouble here. You're not really taking a lot of steps. And, this is great information for you. But what I will do is I'll just say for right now, let's just take a minute and look at these questions. I'll walk through them with you. And it's just a yes or a no. That's all you have to answer. So I'm going to read these off. And if you have questions, by the way, at any point during this, you can raise your hand. You can type in the chat. Aaron will be monitoring just in case I miss anything in the chat. So please feel free to interject questions. I may say, yeah, we'll get to that later. Or I may take time to answer the question. And there will be time for questions at the end too. Let me just read these and you'll get a sense right away of, ooh, yep, I've done that, or no, I haven't. All right. So these are questions you should ask yourself. I have one email address that I use exclusively for my online financial accounts and nothing else. This is kind of a newer recommendation. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but having one email address dedicated to your financial life that is more or less anonymous. It's not hooked up to any of, it's not the account your Netflix is registered to. It's not the account that you have anything else registered to. It's only for financial. That can be helpful just for organizing your life, by the way. It can be handy that way, but it also can help you be a little more secure. We'll get into that. I have two-step verification. This is a no-brainer, okay? When you log in and somebody bugs you to say, hey, set up two-factor authentication. You can, you get a text every time you sign in and you kind of roll your eyes and you're like, yeah, but that just makes logging in way more annoying. I agree with you, it does, but it also makes logging in way more secure, right? And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build more obstacles in order to keep you safer. The way I describe this, and I was thinking about this the other day, and I don't remember if this is a real quote or it's a quote from a movie or what, but the context was cops and criminals, okay? And the idea was to be a career criminal is actually kind of hard because you have to get away with it every time. The cops only have to catch you once, right? And that sentiment's been applied to other things too. But you have to get away with it every time. The cops only have to catch you once. Well, being safe, being secure with your online life, your identity, is like being the criminal in that case, meaning you have to get it right every time. The criminals who are trying to steal our identities only have to get it right once. That is a very tough burden, right? There's an asymmetry there where we've got to be at a high level of security and they only have to beat us once for them to get the information because they only have one identity. So it's incredibly important to build as many obstacles as you can to try to wall them out from getting that. And two-factor authentication, another great thing. I'll go a little bit faster because we're going to get to a lot of these in more detail in a second. I can spot the difference between dangerous free public Wi-Fi and useful secure free public Wi-Fi. Very important, basically, and it's more complicated than this. But if it's public Wi-Fi that doesn't have a password on it, we should be suspicious of it. That doesn't mean it's bad. That doesn't mean anything bad's going to happen. But if it's public and it doesn't have a password on it, meaning it's not like the dentist's office or our office has free Wi-Fi, but there's a password that I can give you to get into it, it's going to be a little less secure, and we need to take that into account. I understand how to tell if my home Wi-Fi network is vulnerable to hackers and how to boost the network's security, right? So baseline, that means having a password on your own Wi-Fi. I know, again, it can be annoying sometimes, but most Wi-Fi networks these days kind of have these enhanced security built in. You used to be able to just set up your router right out of the box with no password, and that was kind of optional. And then everybody quickly realized that's not a good idea. That leaves you very vulnerable. Whenever money leaves my bank accounts, again, these are all yes or no questions. Whenever money leaves my bank accounts or my credit cards are charged, I'm alerted to that transaction. Okay. Now, there's levels to this, right? In terms of, do you really want to get an email for every single time you take out your credit card and use it? I use my credit card so much that would inundate my email with just that. Again, maybe that's why you have a separate email. But certainly, I would recommend talking to your bank and your credit card company about a threshold, right? Where it's, hey, if I spend more than $100 in one place or whatever number you want it to be, send me a ping. And again, it's going to be annoying for a lot of it. You're just going to get a ping every time you buy something for a lot of cases, but you never know if that'll catch a fraudulent piece of activity. So that's another piece of it. I have complete control over my credit files at the big three bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, because I've placed them on the highest security level. This goes into, if you're not familiar with what this goes into kind of what they usually recommend after you've been breached. You'll get a packet in the mail. Hey, you may have been part of a breach. We recommend you contact the big three credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and put your security basically on the highest level there, or you can kind of lock your credit based on with those places. That I'm not saying you need to do that at all times, but you want to make sure you're continually monitoring that you're on the highest security level. I've confirmed with the credit bureaus that my minor children have not been the victims of identity theft and frozen their credit files, right? You may not be paying attention to kids or even grandkids because you're like, well, of course they're not going to go take out a loan at a bank. But these things have happened before where minor children have, scammers, obviously not the kids themselves, but scammers have used identification from a minor child, gotten through some checks and balances at banks, and actually taken out loans. That's something that's happened before. And you can monitor that via the credit bureaus. I run an updated antivirus software on my program on my computers and devices. You got to be watching to make sure you're not being attacked by a cyber attack via a virus or something else like that. I always make sure that my computer and devices have the most up-to-date software programs. This is one that does get overlooked. Usually they try to prompt you to update your programs, but you want to be proactive about that to a large extent. There's a couple scenarios where you want to be, you always want to look at what the update's saying. And I know that all this stuff is adding burden. So I'm going to try to break this down in a way that makes it so that you can do this without feeling like you're having to, it's like a second job, just managing your digital life. These are hopefully just simple things where you can do them once and then they're done. And then you can just check in on them from time to time. All right. And I have a system for ensuring that I can recover from a ransomware phishing attack without paying an extortion fee to a criminal. Okay. I will admit this is rare that you personally are going to be ransomware, which, by the way, is just a terminology for someone gets access to your computer, whether they trick you to get your passwords or however it happens. And basically they lock your computer up with a virus and they say, hey, wire some money to this place and we will unlock your computer for you. And you're going to be tempted, if that happens, to take that option because it seems like the simplest option. Hey, it's just money. This is such an annoyance to my life, but there are better ways to get around that. Maybe contacting tech support and figuring out how to free your computer from their clutches so that they can't go in and do it again as well. And then you can score yourself, give yourself 5 points. Again, there's a scorecard for this, but basically, if you have more yeses than nos, you're on the right track here. And if you have more nos than yeses, then there's going to be some things we're going to go through here in a minute that I think will be able to improve your overall cybersecurity. So there are 3 mindsets. This isn't my terminology, but I think it captures something, right? Secrecy, omniscience, and mindfulness. All right. Well, secrecy is, I think I'm still visible. Our lights, I'm in the office today and the lights dimmed because I haven't been moving around enough, but I think I'm still okay. So anyway, secrecy is obviously keeping passwords secret, making sure they're hard to crack. We'll get into that in a second. Omniscience is being aware of your total financial life. Again, that goes to talking with the credit report bureaus, getting the alerts set up with your credit card and bank account. And then mindfulness is just being sort of aware of your surroundings, right? When I get that strange email in my inbox, do I just go click on the link or do I get suspicious about it? I'll tell you a couple examples. First off, the good news for everybody on this call who works with us is we, as an organization, Stein Financial Group, as well as our our broker dealers, Cetera and Back to Voy and ING, really no incidents of cyber issues in this case. I've been affected personally, just like many of you have, but we have not had an instance where our financial information for anyone or even the company itself has been affected in a way that got to anybody's private data. So that's great. We haven't had this problem professionally. But that doesn't mean that there aren't attempts. And what I mean by that is I get phishing emails just like you probably do. I got one yesterday, and it was the classic, it was in email in my inbox, in my work email, that said, hey, you have a USPS delivery. You need to confirm it. Click this link to go there. Well, luckily, and I think can be a blind spot for some people, but luckily that sticks out to me like a sore thumb, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know about any delivery. There's no way this is legit. So I reported it as spam or phishing in this case, and I move on. But again, it only takes one of those to get through. And this is true of me personally, me professionally, or you. We have to continue to be watchful and mindful. And these scams are getting very sophisticated, where you can get phone calls that say, hey, you've been affected by this certain virus, and log into your computer and I'll show you. And they make it look like, they'll bring you to a part of your computer that you've never seen before. They'll just tell you how to get there, and they'll say, see, that's a virus. And if you're not familiar with that, you'll say, ooh, that does kind of look weird. Maybe I should give them access to my computer. Hopefully we're all, a little versed on these scams now, but they're going to continue to evolve. And just assuming, this is my point, just assuming that, well, I'm savvy enough, Anthony, I'm going to be able to sniff those out, they're going to look suspicious to me, is not a good enough game plan. And I'd like to believe that too, right? We'd all like to believe that we're sophisticated enough to catch that. But unfortunately, again, it only takes one time. You're tired, you didn't read it right, and it looks real, and then all of a sudden, bang, they've got your information, and the wall, at least in one part, has come down. So certainly I recommend being very cautious. I mean, I literally professionally for my work email, I've gotten emails from Cetera before, our real broker dealer, that I've looked at and I've said, I didn't know this email was coming. It's asking me for some information here. I'm going to send an email to somebody just to make sure this is legit. And it pretty much always is, but I don't feel comfortable going forward with it until I get that second confirmation. Right. And I think that if your alarm bells go off in any way, don't think that you're being overcautious or you're being silly. Take those extra steps. If I get an email personally from a company or something like that, and it's like, hey, here's a great offer you might want to consider, or we need you to do this for us. I, most of the time, if not all of the time, Google that company independently, and I make sure that it lines up with the information that I've seen in the email. They're quoting the same phone numbers, the same email address, the same website links. I go independent to verify the content in that email. And, to an extent, you could say, well, is that being a little paranoid, Anthony? I suppose it is, but that's kind of what we're talking about, right? We're talking about being a healthy level of paranoid when it comes to some of this stuff. So key idea number one, we're going to hit those three ideas. Adopting a new level of secrecy can boost your security and cyber confidence. I think we all have cyber confidence these days, or most of us do. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we have too much. I remember when the internet was more new and Amazon was first starting, and people were I don't know if I'm going to use this Amazon thing because now they got my credit card and that feels a little fishy. And now, God, how many packages go out every week from Amazon? We seem to have gotten over that fear, right? But maybe now it needs to not go back to being afraid, but just be more cautious than we're used to being, right? So this is one that I'll be frank, I had not heard of this before I saw this in the notes here. And I think it's a great idea, and I'm going to do it myself, which is create an email address that is dedicated only to your financial accounts. So you would give this email address to me because your statements would go there. You'd sign up to you'd change it on your bank accounts. And I know that's a hassle. I get it. If you've already got one established, I get it. It'll be a hassle for me when I do it. But here's why it's a benefit. It organizes everything. It's all in one place. And you don't want to use, like my work email is agerbi@steinfg.com, right? So my first initial last name. Don't do that for this one. Make it more random. Make it, and don't use any identifying information. It doesn't mean it has to be like just a string of numbers at gmail.com, but it can be more random than that. And that's going to make it harder to tie it to your information. Again, if my email address is publicly out there. So if I'm agerbi@steinfg.com, they can just Google Gerbi, and my name is uncommon enough that they're eventually going to figure out that it's Anthony Gerbi. And then they're going to be able to figure out, based on my other public online things, which are not super widespread, but are out there. Okay, Anthony Gerbi is a financial advisor. Anthony Gerbi works at this address. They're going to be able to intuit things about my life and potentially start trying to guess passwords, right? And just so you know, I'm not worried about this. I'm secure enough in my passwords that they're never going to be able to be guessed or phished in that way. But this makes it harder to do that. Make a strong and unique password. Do that on all your accounts, by the way, but having a separate email for your financial life can be a great firewall so that if your regular email gets compromised, by the way, this is the other reason to do it. Let's say somebody phishes you for a completely non-financial thing, and then they get access to your email. Well, then they don't have access to any of your financial information if it's all being funneled into this other place that's not used for anything else. Again, we're putting out more obstacles for people. Beat the password paradox, which is, you probably have seen all these statistics about the longer a password is, the more types of characters are, like it exponentially gets harder to crack. In fact, I think I have a statistic here that speaks to that in my notes here. How long does it take for a computer to crack 1,000 weak passwords? It takes it 17 minutes just by brute forcing, guessing everything, basically. And a weak password is short. It's all letters. There's no numbers or capitals or symbols mixed in. And even worse, it's password or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or last name and birth year, or birth year and then last name, right? And we've all been guilty of this in some way because you want to be able to remember those passwords. But I'll tell you right now, and I'm not going to tell you my passwords, but my passwords for pretty much everything I do are ridiculously long. True story. When people come over to my house and they need to get on the Wi-Fi, I just say, look, I'll tell you my password, but you're going to want me just to type it in myself because it's literally like an entire phrase. And it takes me time to type it in. And that's annoying. I won't beat around the bush. I'm annoyed when I have to do it, but I know it's secure because it's, over 20 characters long. It's not going to be able to be cracked. The only way somebody's getting in with that password is if they somehow find it. They're never going to guess it. And it's, by the way, it's not what's on the screen here, which is, well, my mnemonic is Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water, and now it's J and J, lowercase w, superscript. That to me is way more annoying. Mine is just letters and numbers. And it's easy for me to remember because it's a phrase I know. It's a longer phrase I know. I don't think you need to go as extreme as they went here because that would just, let's be honest, that would piss me off having to type that into everything I logged into, right? J ampersand capital J W, you get used to it, but I'd be annoyed. But it should be at least that long, and it should have capitals, lowercase, numbers, and maybe throw a symbol or two in there. It just makes it harder to guess, right? Goal setting password example. So if your passwords are still closer to birth date, last name, or your pet's name and your birth date, or something that if I knew a lot about you, I could eventually guess, those are passwords we need to change. And having them potentially stored in a password saver, like Google has one, there's third-party ones, LastPass. We use that at the office, which, by the way, are not foolproof by any means, but they can help you be more unique. And then you just need to be very conscious that the password aggregation tool doesn't have a weak password on it itself, because then once they get in there, they got everything, right? But I use password aggregation myself, and it helps me create more unique passwords, which I think is important. Again, there's pros and cons to going with like a Google or a LastPass or something like that, because you are centralizing information. But in our modern age, sometimes it's a good intermediate step here. Enable two-factor authentication. Okay. Now, sometimes in the past, this was you get a text message with a code every time you log in. Now they have these authenticator apps. Google has one, Microsoft has one. I think there's a couple other maybe third-party ones out there. I have those on my phone, and what they do is there's a number, a 6-digit number that shows up, and then a little wheel spins. And after a minute or 30 seconds or whatever the timer is, a new 6-digit number flashes up. And it cycles through that throughout the entire day. And the only time you need to use it is when you log in. So you're going to go to your login page on whatever you're logging into, and it's going to say, okay, username, password, like we're all used to. And I know some of you know this already. I'm just in case I'm taking it from the basic step. You log in, and then it's going to say, great, now we need to verify your login. Go to your authenticator app and tell us what the password says. So you open it up on your phone. What's the 6 numbers? Type those in. Great, you're good to go. Or you can set it potentially to do the old-fashioned send you a text message. Either way, that is one level more secure. What that means is you can't just get in with just the password. So if your password were to be hacked or phished, or and by the way, I'm using phishing. I shouldn't assume that everybody knows that. Phishing as in PHISH, that's when somebody sends you a suspicious email and they're trying to get you to fill out a form that you think is legit and type in your email or your info to, and now they have it. They're, in essence, they are phishing, but it's spelled PHISH. Again, in our modern world, most people have experienced that at some point, but just in case, I'll try to be thorough. But anyway, that means that if your password is compromised, that's not enough to get into your accounts. And so for financial accounts, it's especially important because you need as many firewalls as you can before they get to your sensitive information and or your money, right? And most places, including with us, now kind of default to that. Some places still give you the option. And if you've been holding out, if you've not taken advantage of it, I would genuinely make that a priority. That's one easy thing you can do. Yes, does it make things a little more annoying? It does. It does. I won't lie. It's unfortunate that the best way to protect yourself is to make your life more annoying in some ways, but that's where we're at. And it will end up helping. It is a good move. That's why it's being recommended to you. Use public Wi-Fi with extreme caution. Okay. I'll give you my first example. If Wi-Fi is public and I need to do something for work, including even just sending an email on my phone, if I'm out in public somewhere, I do not connect to that Wi-Fi if it's something for work. Okay. I will use cell service to send an email or to log in and look at a piece of information. And it's not because I don't, public Wi-Fi is usually just fine, right? But it only takes the once. Again, that's the thing to take away. It only takes the once for something to happen. And I am just too cautious, or I guess you could say paranoid, to expose any business information to a public Wi-Fi, right? Private Wi-Fi, my house, our work, I feel good about those. They're secure, right? But public, I don't know. I don't know who's tapped into this, especially if it doesn't have a password. No. I'll use cell service. If I'm in like a foreign country, for example, I will pay to get cell service while I'm there. And so that I can be this discriminating about Wi-Fi. And again, it's not all, and sometimes public Wi-Fi can be great. And sometimes public Wi-Fi has a password that you can get, and all this stuff can be just fine. So I don't want you to live your life in fear, when we talk about stuff like this, that sometimes sounds like what I'm saying. It's just about being cautious about it. And I do not trust public Wi-Fi. And thankfully, I haven't had anything go wrong. So it's not like I'm, reacting to some negative event that happened in the past. It's just, I know what can happen and I don't trust it. So, use your smartphone as a hotspot. That's a great way to go about it. Use a VPN, which is a virtual private network. Again, I won't go into the tech details of those, but take steps to mitigate the risk of exposing yourself to a public Wi-Fi, especially one with no password on it. Securing your house. Encrypt your wireless router. Change your router's username. Oh, this is a huge one. Okay. When you take your wireless router to get Wi-Fi in your house out of the box, it's going to come with a default username and password. Usually the username is like the ID of the router. They all have an individual ID. And the password is often also that ID, or it's like the last 4 digits of that ID and then a little bit of information from somewhere else. But oftentimes the password is literally written on the bottom of the router, like it as the ID number. Now it's a string of meaningless letters and numbers. So it's not like your password is password 1 and that's what's written on the bottom there. But anybody who knows that, all they have to do is actually physically look at your router and they've got your first password. So if you have a router at home that you have not changed the username and the password on, that is something you should also do today if possible. And I know it's annoying to do that. If you don't know how to do it, there are guides on the internet. You can ask me, but I would literally just probably point you to a guide on the internet to do it, because that's what I would do if I had to do it. I don't know how to do it just off the top of my head. So genuinely, if you didn't know this, those passwords are very easy to obtain if you just know what the router's ID number is. So if you've never changed that password, you need to do that, because that leaves your home Wi-Fi network vulnerable. So what does that mean? Well, somebody could park outside your house in range of your Wi-Fi with a computer or with their phone and basically figure out, if you've never changed it, what your password is, get onto your Wi-Fi, and then potentially, survey your network and try to scrape your information. Again, is that likely? No. I mean, I don't see a lot of strange cars parked outside on my street, but it's possible. And we don't want to leave that possibility open. Okay. And there's a couple other things. First off, changing username and password, making sure it's encrypted, making sure there is a password. Again, back in the day when routers first came out, it was more common to kind of leave your Wi-Fi open. And then most people turned it off because they're like, well, I don't want my neighbor getting Wi-Fi for free and stealing it from me and making my speed slower. So we all kind of learned passwords for that reason. But obviously, as password would apply, it's very important for security as well. So completing certain acts, we're on to section 2 here, 2 of 3. Completing certain actions can help you achieve financial cyber omniscience. I don't like that word, by the way. Omniscience implies you know everything. You're never going to know everything. What our goal is to know more, to be as aware as we possibly can, so that we can either, one, prevent the fraud from happening in the first place, or, and this is the real important reason for me, react to it extremely quickly. That is the big danger, right? It's not just about getting hacked or having your information exposed. It's reacting to a fraudulent charge quickly. That makes all the difference in the world. The quicker you react to it, the sooner that new credit card comes in the mail, right? And they lock down your account. There's no more charges, and there's less for the credit card company to have to refund. By the way, I don't think this is mentioned, but since credit cards are talked about on the screen, I use a debit card for one thing, and that is pulling money out of an ATM. I do not use a debit card for anything else unless I am forced to. Like, they literally won't take a credit card, which is pretty rare these days, at least in the US. And one of the big reasons for that is somebody gets my credit card number. I see a couple fraudulent charges on my statement. I call the credit card company. They give me my money back. They send me a new card. I'm not out a penny, right? If somebody gets my debit account, my debit card number, they can drain my bank account or take large chunks before there's going to be any, stoppage on the bank's end, because it's going to look like, well, that's Anthony. Now, banks have been getting better at this. They have more, hey, if a debit card charge was made in Florida, but 2 hours ago you made another one in Minnesota, yeah, that's going to raise a red flag. So hopefully we can get notified. But you don't always just get refunded if somebody gets a hold of your debit card information either, because that's just your money. When you use a credit card, you're using the bank's money first, and then you're paying them back. That's the debt part of it. But when they get a hold of your debit card, if somebody that's your money that they're taking out. So now it's a lot more complicated to get that refunded because the bank's not there to just eat it for you. So I really encourage using credit cards over debit cards when possible, as long as, and here's the financial piece of the advice, as long as you can pay that credit card off in the next month, right? You're not carrying the balance over. because then you don't have to pay any interest. Obviously, if I factor in interest, then yeah, I'd rather use a debit card because I don't want to have to pay interest. But genuinely, this is true. I only use debit cards for pulling money out of ATMs when I need it. That is it, unless I am forced to by something where they'll only allow me to hook up a bank account. So I also have alerts on my phone for my credit card and my bank account. And I have thresholds. This is recommending it for all charges, which I suppose I could do. That would be something that I could improve on. But again, every cup of coffee I buy, I don't necessarily want, because I use my credit card so much, I don't know if I want that many emails coming in every year, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. And then you're fully aware. Every time you use that credit card, you get an email. If you ever get an email and you don't know what happened, something's wrong, right? Then you know right away and you can react quickly. That's what this is about. You can set all that up online. You can do it with your bank. You can do it with your credit card. Again, I've got it for both my bank and my credit card, just at a certain threshold, where it would be like, okay, well, this is a more significant chunk of money. I should know what's happening if I get that email. But I recommend this as well. Freeze your credit and protect your children. Sign up for a credit freeze at all 3 of the credit bureaus. So what this means basically is you're preventing anyone, including yourself, from taking out a loan or using your credit in some way to apply for something new. Now, what happens when you want to do that, when you want to take out a loan, when you want to buy a new car or whatever, well, then you just unfreeze it for that transaction, right? So you can, you don't have to lock yourself into never using your credit again. But what it does is it prevents the opportunity for these nefarious actors, if they were to get access to your information, from using it to take out fraudulent loans in your name or things of that nature. So it's a good idea. And especially for minors who have no business taking out loans in the first place, it's a no-brainer for that, because then, if they're your kids or grandkids, they're not going to take out loans, at least probably until they're, maybe if they buy a car themselves in their teens, or maybe when they go to school for college loans. But college loans are a little bit different in terms of how they even take them out versus like a car loan or a mortgage. So, if you've got a grandchild or a child in there, under 10, we're pretty confident they don't have no business taking out a loan, right? And so you can lock that up for them. And freezes are free in every state. You get a PIN where you can unlock it. You can request a search on a child's social security number at all 3 of the bureaus and freeze their credit. It's just good proactive steps to take. And number 3, so mindfulness. Again, back to our Venn diagram of secrecy, omniscience, which I don't like, just awareness maybe is a better word, and mindfulness. Mindfulness means you're staying alert without overwhelming yourself. Again, all of these things that I've talked about, if you took them all in succession, you'd be like, Anthony, you might have made my life more secure, but you've also made it 2 times more annoying than it used to be. And I get it. I'm with you. That's not our intention. But it is incredibly important to stay on top of this and do it in a reasonable way. Don't just say, well, I'm going to work a full 8-hour day on cybersecurity. I mean, if that's you, great. But do it a chunk at a time. Hey, this weekend, I'm going to spend 1 hour just thinking about this. And then after that hour's up, I'm going to be done, and I'll do it more again next weekend. It's a constant maintenance is the point. And I did see a comment come through. Alerts for kids' debit expenses on every use to be sure to backfill with funds from savings. Debit comes from checking while all assets are in savings account. Super, really great piece of advice there. So I just read the comment. What this person sent in a comment to us and said, I have debit alerts to my phone on all my kids' debit cards. And so when they're spending money, I'm able to kind of check and make sure that they're backfilling their checking account with enough to continue to cover what they're spending, right? Because in this case, the money is in a savings account, but the debit obviously is linked to a checking. Super important. And I've had people who have done this for elderly parents who said, hey, I'm going to set up a credit card alert to my email for your credit card account, or I'm going to set up your email to like auto forward it to me so that I can kind of keep an eye on it for you. Kids and parents, I think, can benefit from that. Anybody who you feel like is maybe a little more vulnerable than you even, it's kind of like being in an airplane, right? And the oxygen masks come down. Thankfully, I've never been in a plane where that's happened. But when they do the demonstration, what do they tell you? They always say, when the mask comes down, put it on yourself first and then go put it on others. That's how I feel about this. Take care of yourself first. Make sure you're protected as best we can be. And again, that you'll never be 100% protected. But then go out and look at who else might need some help. Kids who don't understand what, all of the vulnerabilities maybe that are out there. Certainly parents or grandparents that are aging who didn't grow up with this technology, who again are more likely to potentially fall for a scam. Not making a comment about anyone's parent or grandparent individually, but you know who you know. Watch out for them too. So that's a great idea. I'm glad you mentioned that. Having alerts on your loved ones is possible, and if you're responsible, can help you kind of mitigate a bad actor right away instead of or prevent it in the first place. Update your software. Now, this says always. I'm going to say there's a couple instances where you need to be a little cautious. And let me use an iPhone as an example. So I have an iPhone. There's when there's a new iOS update, especially a big one, they're like, yep, update right away. It's got new security enhancements. And 99 times out of 100, that's exactly right. New security enhancements. What they've done, why they're sending this update out to you, is that they've identified some holes and they're fixing them with this new update. So you want to get that on your phone as fast as possible. Whenever there's a big iOS update, I always just do a quick Google, okay? And not because I'm suspicious of the update, but because every once in a while, Apple's not perfect, and this is true of Android as well, or Windows or computers too. Every once in a while, one of those updates, there ends up being a problem with it. And when you update, you can screw up your phone for a while, whether it's a security reason or just a usability thing, like a bug. So, I always just do a quick Google, new iOS update problems. And you'll see, you'll probably see a few articles for every update. Oh, some people are having this problem. But if it's not like a mainstream news organization that like everybody's having this problem, you're probably good to go. And, obviously they try to minimize it, but that's not a bad idea. Again, I know that's maybe a little paranoid of me, but I've had problems where you do an update and all of a sudden stuff doesn't work anymore. And then you're like, oh, shoot. Now I just got to wait for them to fix it and push a new update, which they usually do pretty quickly. But so that's my one caution, is just maybe throw a quick Google in there to see if anybody else is having problems with the update. But in general, you want to update as soon as the updates are available, because oftentimes they fix security holes that were found to exist. And that's sometimes why the update's coming through. This is true of the apps on your phone. This is true of your phone itself. This is true of your computer and the programs you use on your computer. Anything technology software that gets updates, you want to just, try to be on top of that. And setting up auto updates is a great way to do that. Depending on your computer system, sometimes those auto updates don't apply until you shut down your computer. And, some of us, I usually shut down my computer every night, but I do know people who kind of just let their computer sleep and just leave it on. And sometimes updates don't actually get fully applied until it fully shuts down and reboots. So every once in a while, check on that. Say, hey, any updates? Usually it'll prompt you when you want to shut down the computer. If there are updates, it'll be like, hey, we've got some updates. You want us to put those on while you shut it down and then turn it back on? And you just say yes, and you're good to go. And then antivirus software. Now, I will say that the, Windows and Apple, Microsoft and Apple are better now than they used to be about having native protection, meaning it's built into their computers that you already have. But there are options out there for a more stringent level of protection. I'm not going to necessarily endorse any one of them for you because I'm not an expert in that world, but looking into those options it can be a valuable thing. Back up your files so you never pay ransomware or extortion. In general, your important documents, and this could be just pictures because those are important, but try to back them up, have them on your computer if you have space, or like a hard drive. You can download them to a separate hard drive that lives in a drawer somewhere, and to the cloud, right? It says rule of 3, computer, physical backup device, cloud. I think if you do at least 2 of those, you're in pretty good shape. And, a lot of your computers are going to do this by default now. Microsoft or Windows has their SharePoint system, which is their cloud option. Apple obviously has iCloud, and a lot of stuff gets backed up there by default anyway. So what this means is if somebody takes control of your computer, all of your data is still somewhere else, either on this physical hard drive that you can get or in the cloud that you can re-download from a server somewhere, from a database that Apple or Google or Microsoft maintains. And that what that means is you can say, hey, this computer, I don't have to deal with these extortioners. And again, hopefully this doesn't happen to anybody. And this is I won't say it's a rare thing because it does happen, but it's gotten to a bad level if this is already happening for you, where you're getting a literal extortion attempt happening. But then what you can do is you can just wipe your computer, and that will clear everything off of it, including the ability of the person to access it. And then you can just re-download everything. So basically you just hit the reset button and re-download everything from wherever you backed it up from. I think that's incredibly important. It's just handy too. I mean, forget about cybersecurity. Just what if you accidentally delete something? What if something goes wrong on your computer? What if your computer falls off your desk and crashes to the ground and breaks? Well, if you got it backed up to the cloud or another device, then you still have all your stuff. And that's it just makes your life better. So as opposed to all these other things I'm suggesting that just get annoying, this one, it might be annoying to set up the first time, but once you have it set up, it can save you a huge headache later if there are problems. All right. Looking at emails is both an art and a skill. And I mean, looking at them and determining, is this legit or not, right? And there are ways that you can kind of analyze an email. And this presentation recommends you take 10 seconds, especially if it's an email that looks suspicious, but know the signs of an email that's made to look regular, but is suspicious, right? It could be from someone you know, or it could look like it's from someone you know, but then it's actually not. Look at the subject line. Is there anything there that looks out of place, or is there anything there that's urgent? Okay, I will tell you right now, if you send me legitimately, if you all get on your, please don't do this, by the way, because it'll make my day more hard. But if you get on your email and you send me an email right now that says, Anthony, all caps, Anthony, I need $10,000 right now, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. I'm going to get very suspicious. Now, you may have typed that email out yourself, right? It may be totally legit. You may just be, something's going on. We had an emergency repair at the house. I need the money. It's all legit, right? I'm going to get very suspicious because those are hallmarks of scam attempts. I need some money. I need it right now. There's no time to talk about. And the kicker would be if you also said, by the way, I have a brand new bank account you've never heard of before. That's where the money should go. Then I'm like, okay, I'm calling somebody. We are going to do an investigation. I'm calling you. Hey, what's going on? Tell me what's happening. Is somebody holding a gun to your head? Right? Like, legitimately, my alarm bells would go off if you sent me an email like that. So please don't. Please don't. I gave that example. This is to show you how secure we are. I am required by law to report things that look suspicious like that to my superiors at Cetera so that we can investigate and make sure you're not being taken advantage of or I'm not being taken advantage of. We take that very seriously. Banks do as well. Anybody who deals with money has very strict laws surrounding how we deal with things that are suspicious like that, laws and regulations. So I'm not kidding around. Like, that is something I take very seriously, but you can apply that as well. If you get an email from somebody that's really urgent, take a second. What's going on? Is this a real problem? Don't get caught up in, oh my gosh, they're in trouble. I had, this is years and years ago now, but when my grandmother was still alive, she got a call one day and it was from, and she wasn't the most tech savvy person in the world. It was on her cell phone. So I don't know exactly what it looked like on her end because I wasn't there, but she said it was from my number, or no, maybe she said it was from a different number, but she picked up and said, hello. And the other line said, Grandma? And she said, yeah. And then it said, it's Anthony. It's Anthony. I'm in trouble. I need some money. And she listened to it for a second and said, that doesn't sound like Anthony. And got a little weirded out and eventually hung up. It didn't do anything. And she called me right away. She called me from her phone like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? What's going on? And I said, oh, no, I'm fine. What's going on with you? She said, well, you didn't just call me, did you? And I said, no, I didn't. And she was like, Oh my gosh. So what that meant is somebody had figured out that my grandmother had a grandson named Anthony. Now, we had the same last name. It wouldn't be terribly hard to figure that out through publicly available data. So they were trying to get her to think that I was in trouble. Now, thankfully, she saw through it, but that still happens. Phone calls happen, texts happen, emails like that happen. Be alert to that. Who's sending the email, right? And this is more important for like companies. Make sure that, if what's a good example here? Well, you get an email from like Microsoft, right? Make sure just glance at it, make sure it looks right, because you never sometimes is that the IMI Microsoft? Is the I a number one? Is it an L? Did they make their email address look like Microsoft, but it's not, right? And it should look like something's off, but just take 1 second and scan that to be like, hey, this is from somebody, this is from a weird looking email address. I don't know about this. Our email servers like Gmail and Outlook, or even Hotmail, are better these days at notifying us of that. Hey, this is from someone you've never gotten an email from before. So they sometimes have those protections built in, but just know that take a quick scan. Greetings test. How are they greeting you? Especially if it's a person you know and it feels like they're being very formal, or it's a person you don't know or a company and it feels like they're being really personal. Like your alarm bell should start to go off for that. Grammar is a huge one, right? A lot of these scams end up coming from places overseas. Maybe their English isn't the scammer's first language. That can be used to kind of differentiate a little bit. However, that issue is going to get even harder to detail, because I imagine, if I was a scammer, this is what I'd do. I'd be using AI to write all my scam emails, and AI probably isn't going to have a grammar issue. So, obviously, if you see grammar problems, that's a big red flag, but don't just trust that that's going to be able to tell it to you all at once. Signature test, again, who are they claiming to be is a big one. And think about it. If it's from a company, or like, hey, you need to verify this piece of information for Microsoft. I'm picking on Microsoft. I'm not trying to say anything about them as a company. I'm just on a Windows computer right now, I guess is why it's on my mind. And you're like, that's weird. I've never gotten an email from that type of person at Microsoft before. They send me marketing stuff. They don't send me like tech support stuff. What's going on here? Don't talk yourself out of those alarm bells. Be cautious about it. And certainly if there's a link or an attachment, right? That's where they're trying to get you. Just opening the email usually doesn't. Although if you identify it as spam, don't even open it, just delete it. But and you can even report it as spam, and Microsoft or Google will flag it and delete it for you, and then they'll flag it in the future too. So you will hopefully get less of them. But if they have a link or an attachment, they want something from you. And if it's not a legitimate person, they usually want something bad. So be very cautious about that. They will put a link that everything looks legit in the email, and they'll say, hey, we just need you to relog into your account for whatever service to verify everything. Maybe they'll even tell you had a breach or something like that, and we just need to change your password. And you'll click on the link and you'll go to a site, and it looks like the real site. It looks exactly like it. And you'll say, oh, okay, well, this looks legit. Let me go take care of this right now. They can build a site that looks exactly like it. They can send you a link. This is one way to tell a little bit, by the way, if it's an HTTPS on your browser. So look at the web address before the www. There should be an HTTPS. Okay, and the S stands for secure, which even an HTTPS is not a guarantee of security, but it's a very strong indicator of it. So in other words, if I was trying to direct somebody to Microsoft.com and I changed the I in Microsoft to lowercase l, let's say, or number one or whatever, or any other of those little tricks that they do, I might not be able to get that domain with an HTTPS, and it'll just say HTTP. And then that's an indicator. Ooh, okay. Microsoft would definitely have a S at their website. We have one. Stein Financial Group does. So any major company will have an HTTPS. If you don't see that S, be suspicious, right? Unless especially if someone's directed you to it. If you're just Googling around and you find one, it doesn't mean that it's a scam website necessarily. But most legit websites these days are going to have that S on there. And you can also, one of the things you could do in an email is I could type out and say, hey, go to this link, www.microsoft.com. And that's what it'll look like. And it'll all be legit. I won't have used any of those little tricks. But then in the email, I'll actually make that text direct to a completely different website. And you can tell that on your end by just hovering your mouse over that website link, and it'll show you in the bottom corner of your screen somewhere what the actual website you're going to go to is, regardless of what they've typed in and made it look like. So that's another thing. Again, hopefully by the time you're even considering clicking on a link, there's been some other alarm bells, but we got to know all the things to look for. All right. So that is our baseline tips. I'm going to go back for a second to that checklist, which again, Aaron put in the chat, which hopefully if you wanted to, you can download, but will also be in our follow-up email to this. So if you had any trouble, sometimes depends on what your firewall is like. Sometimes it's hard to download things from Zoom. So if that was you, it'll be in the follow-up. But what questions or anything do you have for me? Again, I may not be a cybersecurity expert. I can certainly tell you my opinion, the things I know from the trainings I've had, but also I can always forward your questions on to actual experts that we work with for our tech support. So any questions that anyone has about any of the things I've said, any things you've heard somewhere else, we'll open it up here. How often should I change my router password? That's a great question. Let me ask about that to our tech support team. I have a feeling they're going to recommend semi-regularly because it's kind of always good to change your password semi-regularly. I will say, if you have a secure password that is unique to that router, you may not need to change it all that often, would be my personal opinion. But again, I'm not an expert. So it's never a bad idea for any of your passwords to rotate them every handful of months, let's say. You don't need to be doing it every week. But your router password is important because that gives access to your home network. So I would say, maybe every couple months would probably be the maximum that you'd need to do. As long as you have a unique, hard, complicated password like the ones I showed you, you could probably get away with doing it less than that. But I will follow up with a real cybersecurity answer to that as well. Another question: how do I screen a text message to confirm its legitimacy? So in other words, just like phone calls and emails, you can get a scam by text. By the way, I'm assuming all of you are getting crazy texts like I am all over the political spectrum. I'm getting texts for I got a text for the Texas Senate race the other day, like donate to Ted Cruz or something. And I was like, even if I wanted to, why would I donate? He's in Texas. Like, that's not even my representative. I don't know how my number got caught up with that, but I'm assuming you're probably getting that stuff too. So there's a couple things you can do. One, use the same tools that you would use for an email. Do I know the person who sent it to me? You should be able to, if you do and you've texted with them before, you should be able to see your conversation history, right? So if my wife, Emily, texts me and it's not listed, I don't see our previous conversation, it still says Emily on it, I'm going to get suspicious. I'm going to be like, wait a minute, why doesn't it have any of our history? And it could be because this person is pretending to be Emily. Now, that's probably a bad example. I would know very quickly if it was really my wife texting me or not. But again, if it's like, if they're pretending to know you, you should be able to see that pretty quickly. Secondly, if there's a link that they want you to click, be suspicious of that. Even if it looks legit, like, hey, we need you to confirm this, we want you to do this, do a Google just to see, hey, is this the thing that's happening? Or if they're pretending to be a company, I will sometimes call a company to be like, hey, I got an email. Do you see this on your end that what they're saying is going on is actually going on? And a lot of times it can be legit, but I don't feel comfortable until I've externally Googled their phone number separately, called it and said, do you see what this text is telling me about? And then sometimes they'll say yes, and sometimes they'll say no, right? Another thing that I will point out, and this is optional, I'm going to put this in the chat for everybody. If you would like to get, and I believe this is more, I've not done this myself, but I believe this is more for like spam letters in the mail. There is a website, and let me put it to everyone. called optoutprescreen.com. And I'm going to put the link in the chat for everyone. And you'll notice it has the HTTPS on it. So that's a good indication it's legit. But it's the official, I'm looking at their website right now on my other screen. It's the official consumer credit reporting industry website to accept and process requests from consumers to opt in or opt out of firm offers of credit or insurance. So this is not totally directly related to that text message question, but it made me think of this. So in other words, you know how you get in the mail letters from credit card companies and all sorts of, hey, you're eligible for this, you're eligible for that, sign up for our credit card, blah, 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 blah. This website, as I understand it, is a way to reduce or eliminate those. You can opt out of them. It's a website offered by the credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. And you can sign up. And I don't believe, I'll have to double check if it costs anything, but I recommend, if that stuff bothers you, look into it. I have not done it myself. This was just introduced to me recently. So I have not gone in and done it myself, but I feel confident that it's legit here anyway. And it's not, this is not an ad for anybody. All right, another comment came through. I set a freeze for myself and my mom. The confirmation letter for my mom had incorrect name for my mom, spelled incorrectly. Should I contact them to correct? Yes, I definitely would. It may not cause any problems that the name was spelled incorrectly. It could have literally just been somebody read a piece of paper wrong at some point and typed it in with a typo. But as with us, as with anybody, we should always have names correct. You never want to be in a case where everything's legit, but an identity can be mistaken because of a typo in a name. That just creates headaches. So I don't necessarily think that that's a potential cybersecurity issue, but it's just a convenience issue would be my concern about it. You always want to be as accurate as you possibly can. So yes, I would get in touch with them. And this would be the credit bureau or bureaus that you froze it with. I would contact them. I'll tell you, for my personal cybersecurity, as well as the security we have for our Stein Financial Group, as I've told you throughout, I'm very cautious towards emails that look even a tiny bit suspicious. I will go out of my way to call and verify if I'm even a little bit concerned. Even if it doesn't have to be that I'm suspicious. It's just like, that's kind of a weird email. I better double check this. I am very persnickety about that. And I call and what I say to the people is, look, I'm sure this is real. I don't want to waste your time. I need to be certain before I click on it because it's my information, and I've never had somebody who's been annoyed with me for checking. They're like, oh yeah, I'll check on that for you. Tell me what the email is. And they're like, oh, we do show that in our system. Yep. So that is a legitimate email. And I'm like, great. Then I feel comfortable going ahead and dealing with it. So I don't feel like you're bugging somebody if you do that. Hopefully you didn't, but if you do, don't feel that way. You're taking steps to protect yourself. Having big passwords or hard to crack passwords is also something I take very seriously. Is there anything I should be cautious about when paying bills over the phone by taking money out of my checking account? As long as you're certain that it's the legit number, like, again, let me give you a scenario. So let's say I get an email from pick your favorite company and a bill is coming to you. And they're like, hey, you can call this number and pay by phone. If I get that in an email, will usually go and Google that company and see if I can find that same number on their website, right? Because if I can, then I know it's legit. And if it's somebody you've been dealing with for years and the numbers always stayed the same, you're probably in good shape, right? But don't be afraid to Google and say, especially if it's a brand new thing, say, I may have a bill that I know is due. It may look totally legit and it may be totally legit, but let me Google real quick to see if I could find that phone number listed on their website too, independently. That's always the key. Independently look up the information about whoever the email is saying that it's from. And if you can match it, that's a great sign that it's legit. So should you be cautious? Yeah, I'd be cautious like I would be with anything. But, if you've been paying your credit card bill or your electric bill or whatever by phone for years. Just calling on the phone and giving them your bank account number, that's not necessarily an issue. Things can always go wrong, but if you've got a process like that that's worked for a long time, you should be, I would say, normally cautious, but not overly cautious. But if it's brand new, always be a little extra cautious with brand new stuff, even if it's new stuff that you knew about, right? Like, yeah, I did use this service, so I know I'm going to get a bill. Great, but be a little overly cautious about that very first bill, just to make sure that somebody else didn't pick up on the fact that you just used this new service and knew a bill was going to be coming to you, right? Because they could try to send you a fake bill first, and then you have problems. So don't just take it on faith. But if you've got a good track record with the place, that's usually a pretty good indication. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And again, contact info is on the screen if you needed to ask us a question beyond what we covered today. Thank you, everybody. Take care.